In a dystopian future, Earth's environment had long since taken a turn for the worse. The effects of pollution, industrialization, and climate change had left the planet uninhabitable. Humanity was forced to retreat into massive, climate-controlled biodomes that kept them safe from the harsh environment outside. These domes were designed to support a fraction of the world's population, with strict population controls in place to maintain balance. Life inside the domes was regimented and sterile, but it was better than the alternative. Dr. Emily Carver was a young scientist working at one of these domes. She was brilliant, dedicated, and passionate about her work. Her team was currently working on developing new methods to recycle waste materials and extend the life of the dome's precious resources. One day, while excavating through old records in the dome's archives, she stumbled upon a series of hidden documents that would change her life forever. The documents were old, dusty, and worn, but their contents were startling. They were plans for a process known as terraforming, the act of transforming a planet's atmosphere and surface to support life. According to the documents, the Free Horizon, an underground resistance group, believed that it was possible to terraform the toxic wasteland outside the domes and restore the planet to its former glory. The government, however, insisted that terraforming was impossible and too dangerous to attempt. As Emily pored over the documents, she found herself torn between her loyalty to the dome and her newfound belief in the Free Horizon's cause. She knew that revealing the plans would shake the very foundation of the society they lived in, but she also knew that keeping them a secret could mean the death of millions of people who suffered outside the domes. It was a moral dilemma of the highest order. Meanwhile, tensions were rising within the dome. The government was growing increasingly suspicious of Emily's activities, and they were closing in on her. She knew that she didn't have much time before she would be discovered. She decided to reach out to the Free Horizon, hoping to join their cause and help bring about the changes that she believed in. Within a week, Emily had managed to make contact with a member of the Free Horizon. They met in secret, exchanging information and strategies. As they spoke, Emily felt a sense of purpose and belonging that she had never experienced before. The member of the Free Horizon, a man named Thomas, told her that they were close to unveiling their plan to the world and that they needed her help. He offered her a position within their ranks, and she eagerly accepted. As Emily prepared to leave the dome and join the Free Horizon, she couldn't help but feel a sense of both excitement and trepidation. She knew that what she was doing was dangerous, but she also knew that it was the right thing to do. With Thomas's guidance, she hoped to make a difference in the world and maybe even save humanity in the process. The day of her departure finally arrived. She bid farewell to her colleagues and friends, promising to do what she could to make things better. As she stepped out of the dome and into the harsh world beyond, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She was no longer bound by the rules and restrictions of the dome. She was free to pursue her dreams and make a difference. With Thomas and the Free Horizon at her side, Emily began the long and dangerous journey to terraform the planet. They faced countless challenges along the way, from hostile environments to attacks from the government forces who were desperate to stop them. But Emily never once wavered in her belief that they were doing the right thing. And as they slowly but surely began to transform the wasteland into something resembling a livable planet, she knew that they were winning the fight. Years passed, and Emily watched as the world around her changed. She saw the first crops of greenery spring up from the barren soil, and she felt the air grow cleaner and less toxic with each passing day. The government, once powerful and unyielding, was crumbling under the weight of its own corruption and incompetence. And as Emily stood atop a hill overlooking the new world she had helped create, she knew that her decision to join the Free Horizon had been the right one. The biodomes, once a symbol of humanity's greatest achievement, had become a prison that held them back from realizing their true potential. But now, with the planet restored to its former glory, Emily believed that humanity could finally move forward, free from the constraints of the past. And as she looked out at the horizon, she saw nothing but hope and possibility. Emily awoke with a start, her heart pounding. It was still dark outside, but she knew that she had to act fast. The hidden plans she had found in the archives of the research facility were too important to keep secret any long. She quickly dressed and made her way through the dimly lit corridors of the biodome, careful not to draw attention to herself. The air was stale and oppressive, a constant reminder of the fragile balance of life within the dome. As she neared her rendezvous point, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her contact from the free horizon, a man named Thomas, was already waiting for her in the shadows. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. Emily handed him the data chip containing the plans, and he quickly inspected it, his eyes widening in surprise. "This is it," he whispered. "This is what we've been looking for." Emily nodded, relieved that her suspicions had been confirmed. "So what's the next step?" she asked. "We need to get these plans to our main base," Thomas replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "From there, we'll see about getting them to the right people. It won't be easy, but with your help, I think we can pull it off." Emily hesitated. She knew that trusting Thomas and the rest of the Free Horizon was a gamble, but she couldn't deny the hope that their plan inspired. And with the biodome on the brink of collapse, she had to do something. "All right," she said finally. "I'm in." Over the next few days, Emily and Thomas worked together to devise a plan for smuggling the plans out of the biodome. They would have to navigate the heavily guarded perimeter and avoid detection by the omnipresent surveillance cameras. The risk was high, but Emily knew that the stakes were even higher. As they made their final preparations, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The biodome was her home, and the thought of betraying it weighed heavily on her conscience. But she also knew that she was part of something much bigger now, something that could potentially change the course of human history. Finally, the day came. Emily and Thomas waited until the cover of darkness had fallen before making their move. They crept through the shadows, avoiding the patrolling guards as best they could. The perimeter fence loomed ahead of them, an imposing barrier separating them from freedom. With a final surge of adrenaline, they scaled the fence and landed in the toxic wasteland beyond. The air was thick with the stench of chemicals, and the ground was a barren waste of ash and dust. Emily struggled to breathe, feeling a sharp pain in her lungs as she inhaled the putrid air. But she forced herself to continue, driven by the knowledge that she was doing something truly significant. They managed to cross the wasteland without incident, eventually reaching the hidden base of the Free Horizon. The sight that greeted them was one of cautious optimism. The rebels had been working on their own plans for terraforming the planet, and Emily's discovery had given them the edge they needed. Emily was led to a small, dimly lit room where a group of scientists waited. They surrounded her, their eyes filled with a mixture of awe and respect. "Thank you, Emily," one of them said, taking her hand. "You have no idea what this means for us." Over the next few hours, Emily explained the details of the terraforming process to the scientists. They listened intently, asking questions and taking notes. She could see the gears turning in their minds as they began to devise new strategies and techniques for bringing life back to the planet. As the sun began to rise, Emily stepped outside and took a deep breath of the clean, fresh air. For the first time in her life, she could see a future beyond the biodome, a future where humanity might once again walk free upon the earth. And even though she knew that the road ahead would be difficult and dangerous, she felt a sense of purpose and determination burning within her. She turned back to the biodome, a single tear rolling down her cheek. She knew that she would never be able to return to the life she had known before. But she also knew that her actions had set in motion a chain of events that could change everything. As the scientists continued to work on their plans, Emily stood watch over them, a silent sentinel of hope. She knew that the future of the world rested in their hands now, and she would do everything in her power to ensure that they succeeded. For the sake of all those who had suffered and died, she would not rest until the day came when the planet was finally restored to its former glory. Emily's heart raced as she navigated through the hidden passageways, her contact from the Free Horizon guiding her through the maze. They finally arrived at a heavily secured room, where a holographic display projected images of Earth, its surface choked by a toxic orange haze. "This is it," Emily's contact whispered. The government's secret terraforming project. As Emily scrolled through the files, her eyes widened in disbelief. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of government experiments, cover-ups, and failures. They had been trying to terraform the wasteland outside the biodomes for decades, but with little success. The Free Horizons claims suddenly made more sense. They've been lying to us. Emily breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. They've known all along that the wasteland can be saved. She glanced at her contact, a seasoned resistance fighter with steely determination in his eyes. We have to tell everyone. Back at the biodome, Dr. O'Donnell, Emily's suspicious supervisor, called her into her office. Emily, I've been noticing some odd behavior from you lately, she said, her voice cool. Are you sure you're coping with the stress of this assignment? Emily's heart sank. She knew that O'Donnell was onto her, but she couldn't risk revealing the truth. As she sat in O'Donnell's office, Emily's mind raced. Should she continue to keep her discovery a secret, or should she risk everything and expose the government's lies? The fate of humanity hung in the balance. Outside, the air in the biodome grew thick with tension. Rumors of Emily's discovery spread like wildfire, and whispers of revolution echoed through the corridors. The Free Horizon, emboldened by Emily's findings, began to mobilize its forces, preparing for a final showdown with the oppressive government. In the midst of the chaos, Emily received a coded message from her contact, instructing her to meet him at a secret rendezvous point. As she slipped away from the biodome, her heart pounding, she knew that she couldn't delay her decision any longer. She had to decide: protect the stability of the biodomes, or risk everything to save humanity. The meeting with her contact was intense. He pleaded with her to share their discovery with the world, to give humanity a fighting chance at survival. But Emily couldn't shake the image of the millions of people who relied on the biodomes for their survival. She knew that revealing the truth would plunge the world into chaos, and she wasn't sure if she was willing to sacrifice that many lives. As she returned to the biodome, Emily's mind was made up. She would find a way to share the truth, but she wouldn't do it yet. There had to be a better way. She vowed to continue her research, to find a solution that would protect both the biodomes and the outside world. In the days that followed, Emily worked tirelessly, poring over data and consulting with experts. She knew that she was running out of time, that the government was closing in, but she refused to give up. Her discovery had the power to change everything, and she couldn't let that power go to waste. As Emily neared a breakthrough, she received word that the Free Horizon had launched a full-scale attack on the government's main terraforming facility. The resistance fighters were determined to seize control of the technology and use it to restore the planet. The world held its breath as the two sides clashed in a final, desperate battle for the fate of humanity. In the midst of the chaos, Emily finished her research and made a momentous decision. She would present her findings to the United Nations, laying out a plan for a joint terraforming effort between the biodomes and the outside world. It was a risky move, but she believed it was the only way to ensure a brighter future for everyone. As Emily addressed the UN delegates, her voice trembled with hope and determination. "We can save our planet," she declared. "We can make a new beginning. But it won't be easy. It will take all of us working together, putting aside our differences, and believing in a better tomorrow." The world listened, and for the first time in decades, a spark of hope began to flicker. The war between the Free Horizon and the government raged on, but Emily's words had a galvanizing effect. People began to see that there was a path forward, a chance for redemption. In the end, Emily's plan was adopted by the UN, and a new era of cooperation began. The terraforming effort was a massive undertaking, requiring the combined resources and expertise of the biodomes and the outside world. But under Emily's guidance, it slowly began to take shape. Years passed, and the toxic orange haze that once choked the planet began to dissipate. Life began to return to the wasteland, and humanity, battered but not broken, took its first tentative steps towards reclaiming its home. Emily's role in this historic event was never forgotten. She became a symbol of hope and determination, an inspiration to generations who followed in her footsteps. But she never forgot the hard choices she had made, the lives she had affected, and the sacrifices that had been made to get them to that point. In the end, it wasn't about fame or glory. It was about doing what was right, about fighting for a future worth living in. And in the end, that was what truly mattered. Emily sat at her desk, her heart racing as she waited for Dr. O'Donnell to leave the lab. She'd been caught sneaking away from her workstation multiple times in the past few days, and she knew she couldn't keep it up much longer. She'd been investigating the government's involvement in the terraforming project with the help of the Free Horizon, and the more she uncovered, the more she realized just how deep the conspiracy ran. The biodome she lived in was designed to sustain a small fraction of humanity, with strict rationing of food, water, and air. Overcrowding was a constant threat, and tensions were high. Everyone knew about the resistance group, but few dared to join. Emily had always been a rule follower, but the more she learned about the government's deception, the more she felt compelled to act. Finally, Dr. O'Donnell left the lab, muttering under his breath about Emily's recent change in behavior. As soon as the door closed behind him, Emily slipped out and made her way to a secret meeting spot where she was to meet with a contact from the Free Horizon. Her heart pounded in her chest as she navigated the dimly lit corridors, avoiding the occasional patrol. When she arrived at the meeting spot, she was relieved to see her contact waiting for her. His name was Aaron, and he was a seasoned member of the resistance group. "I'm glad you could make it," he said, nodding toward a hidden door. "Come on, let's go." Emily followed him through the door and into a small, windowless room. The room was lit by a single flickering lamp, casting eerie shadows on the walls. A computer terminal was set up in the corner, its screen filled with classified documents. "We've been monitoring the government's communications," Aaron explained. "We've got more evidence of their involvement in the terraforming project, and proof that they've been covering up the true extent of the damage to the environment." He handed Emily a data chip. "This contains everything we've found so far. Take it and use it to convince the others that you're right." Emily took the chip, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking. "But I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this up. Dr. O'Donnell is starting to suspect something." Aaron nodded sympathetically. "We understand the risks you're taking, Emily, but we need your help. You're the only one with access to this information. Without you, we can't stop them." Emily looked at Aaron, torn between her loyalty to the biodome and her growing belief in the Resistance's cause. She knew that her actions could have dire consequences for everyone she loved. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "How do I make sure the right people hear this?" Aaron sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You have to trust your instincts, Emily. You've come this far. You've done the hard part. Now you just have to find the courage to see it through." With those words, Emily stood up, the weight of the world bearing down on her shoulders. She knew that she couldn't go back now, not after everything she'd uncovered. As she made her way back to her lab, she steeled herself for the difficult decisions that lay ahead. She would have to choose between loyalty and truth, between her own safety and the future of humanity. And in the end, she knew that there was only one choice that felt right. Emily hurriedly made her way through the dimly lit corridors of the secret government laboratory, her heart pounding with fear and determination. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant and the faint whirring of hidden machinery. She had spent hours searching the biodome for a hidden entrance that would lead her to this place, and now that she was inside, she knew she couldn't waste any more time. The lab was a nightmarish world of steel and glass, where human suffering had been reduced to a cold clinical science. Emily shuddered as she passed by rows of empty cells, each bearing the scars of countless experiments. She could hear the distant echoes of agonized screams, and the beeping of machines monitoring the vital signs of the few unfortunate souls who still remained here. As she rounded a corner, she spotted a computer terminal glowing softly in the gloom. The screen was filled with complex diagrams and data, but among the code and numbers, she recognized the familiar symbols of the terraforming process. She hurried over to the terminal and began to copy the files onto a portable drive. Suddenly, the room was filled with the harsh glare of fluorescent lights and the angry shouts of security guards. Emily cursed herself for not realizing that the power had been switched on. She whirled around, her heart pounding, as two burly guards grabbed her arms and roughly forced her against the wall. "You shouldn't be here, Dr. Carver," one of the guards sneered. "This is a highly classified facility. You know the consequences of your actions." Emily struggled against her captors, but it was no use. They were too strong, and their grip was like steel. She felt a stab of pain as one of them roughly searched her pockets, removing the portable drive she had been about to steal. "You shouldn't have done that!" Emily spat through gritted teeth. "You have no right to keep this information from the public." The guards exchanged a knowing glance, and the one who had been searching her tossed the portable drive into a nearby locker. "Oh, don't worry," he said with a sickening smile. "We'll make sure this information gets where it needs to go. It's just that we can't have any loose ends." As they led Emily back down the corridor, she could feel the weight of their guns pressing against her spine. The air grew thick with the sound of her own labored breathing and the muffled footsteps of her captors. She fought back the rising tide of panic and despair, refusing to give up hope that there was still a way out of this mess. Finally, they arrived at a small interrogation room where a stern-faced officer sat behind a desk, reviewing a file. The guards roughly pushed Emily into a chair and secured her wrists to a metal ring set into the table. "Dr. Emily Carver," the officer began, looking up from the file. "You have been caught trespassing in a restricted government facility. You know the consequences of your actions. Now we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You can cooperate with us and tell us everything you know, or we can get rough." Emily steeled herself, meeting the officer's gaze unflinchingly. "I have nothing to hide," she said defiantly. "I only want to help the people of this world." The officer leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "Very well, Dr. Carver," he said finally. "Then you leave us with no choice. You're going to have to prove your loyalty to the cause. The rest of your team has already been dealt with. The only question now is what we should do with you." Emily's heart sank as the weight of the officer's words settled heavily on her shoulders. She knew that her friends in the Free Horizon were probably already dead, or worse. But she refused to give up hope. She would find a way to escape, and she would see her mission through to the end, no matter the cost. "What do you mean, prove my loyalty?" she asked carefully. "I've already told you everything I know." The officer smiled coldly. "Yes, but we need more than that. We need to know that you're truly committed to our cause, that you're willing to make the ultimate sacrifice." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She knew what the officer was asking. She had suspected it from the moment she had set foot in the Biodome, but she couldn't bring herself to believe it was true, not until she saw it with her own eyes. "Show me," the officer said simply, sliding a small vial across the table. Inside, she could see a glowing red liquid. "Drink this." Emily's heart raced as she picked up the vial and examined its contents. The liquid was glowing with an unnatural energy, and she could feel the power within it, like a living thing clawing at her soul. She knew what this was. She had seen it before, during her research into the terraforming process. It was the key to unlocking the secrets of the planet's transformation, and it was poison. "Drink it," the officer repeated impatiently. "Prove to us that you're one of us." Emily closed her eyes, steeling herself against the inevitable. She took a deep breath and opened her mouth, preparing to swallow the contents of the vial. As she brought it to her lips, however, she hesitated. She couldn't do it. She couldn't betray her friends, her research, and everything she had worked for. "I can't," she whispered. "I'm sorry." There was a long silence in the room. The officer's expression turned cold and his eyes narrowed. "Very well," he said finally. "Then you leave us with no choice." He gestured to the guards, who stepped forward and roughly yanked Emily out of her chair. They dragged her down the hall and into another room where she could hear the muffled screams of someone else being interrogated. They threw her into a cell, slamming the door behind her with a metallic clang. The cell was small and windowless, and the air reeked of disinfectant and fear. Emily slid to the floor, her shoulders heaving with sobs. She knew that she was now completely alone, cut off from the outside world, but she refused to give up hope. She would find a way out of this place, and she would see her mission through to the end, even if it meant risking everything. As she sat there in the darkness, she felt a strange warmth spreading through her body. The glowing red liquid was doing its work, infecting her with the same alien technology that had transformed this world. She knew that she was now part of the machine, part of the system that had been designed to control and oppress the people of this planet. But she also knew that she would use that power against those who sought to do harm. "I will not let you win," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling with determination. "I will find a way to stop you, even if it means becoming one of you." The hours passed slowly, and Emily's thoughts drifted in and out of focus. She could feel the power within her growing, changing her, making her into something new. She knew that she was no longer the same woman who had entered this biodome only hours before. But she also knew that she was not yet ready to face the world outside these walls. Time seemed to slow down as she sat there, her mind racing, searching for a way out. And then finally she heard something. A distant click, followed by the sound of metal grinding against concrete. Emily's heart leapt into her throat as she realized what it was. Someone was trying to free her. She strained her ears, desperate to hear more, and soon she could make out the muffled whispers of her would-be rescuer. They were arguing about something, but she couldn't quite make out the words. Then, all at once, there was a click, and the cell door swung open. Standing in the doorway was a woman, her features hidden in shadow. Emily couldn't tell if it was one of the guards or someone else entirely, but she didn't care. All that mattered was that she was being given a chance to escape. "Come on," the woman whispered, gesturing for Emily to follow her. "We haven't got much time." Emily nodded gratefully and hurried after her, her heart pounding in her chest. As they raced down the hall and through the biodome, she felt a mixture of relief and fear. She had escaped from her captors, but she knew that she was now a fugitive, hunted by the very people she had once trusted. The woman led her to a hidden exit, and they emerged into the night. The air was cool and fresh, and Emily breathed it in deeply, reveling in the feeling of freedom. But she also knew that she could not rest yet. She had work to do. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "And who are you?" The woman turned to face her, a ghostly figure silhouetted against the moonlit sky. "My name is Eveline," she said, her voice soft but steady. "And we are outside the city limits. The rest of my team is waiting for us in the woods. We're going to need your help if we're going to stop them." Emily nodded, understanding dawning on her. "The Free Horizon," she breathed. "You're part of the Free Horizon." Eveline smiled, her face finally visible in the dim light. "We are," she said simply, "and we could use someone with your knowledge, someone who knows how this planet works. Will you help us?" Emily hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, her hand reaching out to clasp Eveline's. "Of course I will," she said, her voice strong and determined. "I've dedicated my life to understanding this world, and I won't stop until I've freed it from the grip of those who seek to control it." Together, they disappeared into the night, racing toward the safety of the woods and the waiting arms of the Free Horizon. The fight for freedom was just beginning, and Emily knew that she was more than ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Dr. Emily Carver awoke with a start, her heart racing as the cool metal of her prison cell bit into her back. She blinked several times, trying to orient herself in the dim light. It had been hours since she'd been dragged away from the secret government laboratory, her arms and legs feeling numb from the tight restraints that still bound her. The echo of footsteps and muffled voices outside her cell served as a constant reminder of her precarious situation. A guard entered her cell, his face impassive. "Dr. Carver, you're going to have a visitor." He unlocked the cell and roughly pushed her to her feet. "Come with me." Emily followed him down a long, sterile corridor, her steps slow and hesitant. The guard led her into a small interrogation room where a man sat at a table, his posture rigid and his expression unreadable. "Dr. Emily Carver," he began. "I'm Agent Thomas. We've been expecting you." Agent Thomas motioned for her to take a seat across from him. Emily complied, her gaze fixed on his face. "I want to know where the others are," he said bluntly. "Where is the Free Horizon hiding?" Emily shook her head. "I can't do that," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her voice. "You don't understand what they're planning. They can make the world livable again. We can survive out there." Agent Thomas leaned forward, his expression growing more intense. "And what about the rest of us, Dr. Carver? What about the millions of people who are suffering in these biodomes because of your rebels? They don't deserve to die, do they?" He paused, watching her carefully. "We can help you, Emily. You don't have to make this any harder than it already is." Emily felt tears prickle at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't let them die. I have to protect them." Agent Thomas sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Then you leave us no choice." He pressed a button on the intercom. "Bring her in." A moment later, the door opened, and a woman entered the room. Emily's heart stopped as she recognized her. It was Dr. O'Donnell, her supervisor and close friend. "Emily," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't understand what happened. They told me you were just a research assistant. They said you weren't involved with anything important." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she struggled to find the words to explain. "I'm sorry," she managed to choke out. "I never meant for any of this. I just wanted to help them, to save us all." Dr. O'Donnell's face contorted with anger and betrayal. "You selfish idiot," she spat. "You've ruined everything." Agent Thomas cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. "Dr. O'Donnell, I'm afraid we'll have to take Dr. Carver's silence as a refusal to cooperate. In that case, we'll have to proceed with the next step of our plan." Emily felt a cold chill run down her spine as she realized what he meant. The next few hours passed in a blur of pain and terror. Emily was subjected to a series of invasive interrogation techniques designed to break her will and force her to reveal the Free Horizon's secrets. By the end of it, she was a broken, battered shell of her former self. Her mind reeled with confusion and fear as she struggled to make sense of what had happened to her. Finally, her captors seemed to tire of their efforts and left her alone in the cell. Emily curled up into a ball on the cold concrete floor, her body aching from the abuse it had endured. As she drifted in and out of consciousness, she couldn't help but wonder if anyone was even aware of her fate. She wondered if her parents were still alive, if they were even aware of the part she had played in the struggle against the government. Hours passed, and then, just as she was beginning to lose hope, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from the other side of the cell door. She struggled to her feet, her limbs trembling with exhaustion, and slowly made her way over to the door. As she knelt down, she saw a tiny keyhole embedded in the metal. Someone had left her a way out. With shaking hands, she unfurled a strip of cloth she had been saving for just this purpose and carefully slipped it into the keyhole. She turned it gently, feeling the mechanism click into place. The door swung open silently, revealing a dark corridor beyond. Emily took a deep breath and stepped out into the unknown. The rest of her journey was a blur of danger and desperation. She avoided guards, crawled through ventilation shafts, and even once hid in a garbage bin to avoid detection. But she never lost hope. She knew that there was a world out there waiting for her, a world where she could find the people she had been fighting for and help them survive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she emerged from a maintenance hatch in the middle of a biodome. The air was thick with the smell of growing things and the sound of running water. She scanned the area, searching for any sign of the resistance fighters she knew were out there. As she crept through the lush vegetation, she saw a group of people huddled around a makeshift campfire. They looked up as she approached, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. Emily forced herself to stand tall, her shoulders back. "My name is Emily Carver," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I'm with the Free Horizon. I have important information about our enemy." The resistance fighters exchanged glances, their expressions guarded. "You've been through a lot," one of them said cautiously. "How do we know we can trust you?" Emily looked at them, her eyes burning with determination. "Because I'm one of you now," she replied, "and I will do whatever it takes to help us win this war." The fighters hesitated for a moment longer, but in the end, they believed her. They welcomed her into their group and listened intently as she shared the information she had gained from her ordeal. They knew that what Emily had endured would not be in vain. Together they would fight for a better future, for a world where the suffering of the many did not outweigh the greed of the few. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled overhead, Emily knew that she had found her purpose. She was no longer just a research assistant or a prisoner or a pawn in a greater game. She was a warrior, and she was ready to fight for the world she believed in. Emily's heart raced as she took in her surroundings. The dimly lit cell, the cold concrete floor, the metal bars that kept her imprisoned. It had all seemed so surreal only hours ago when she'd been a respected scientist in the Biodome, blissfully unaware of the dark secrets that lurked beneath the surface. Now, she found herself in the midst of a daring rescue mission, her life in the hands of strangers. She felt a familiar hand squeeze her shoulder reassuringly. It was her contact from the Free Horizon, the one who'd helped her uncover the truth about the government's deception. "You're doing great, Emily," he whispered. "Just hold on a little longer." Emily nodded, summoning her courage. She knew she had to be strong, not just for herself but for everyone who'd risked their lives to get her out. As if on cue, a click echoed through the cell, and the door swung open. Light flooded in, momentarily blinding her as a group of armed rebels stormed the room. "Come on, we haven't got all night!" one of them shouted, offering her a hand up. Emily hesitantly took it, feeling a surge of relief and gratitude wash over her. As she stood, she took in the faces of her rescuers. They were all young, determined, and fiercely loyal to their cause. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Thank you for coming for me." "Don't mention it," her contact replied, offering her his arm. "We've been planning this for months. You're our key to setting things right." They hurried through the maze-like tunnels beneath the Biodome, the rebel group moving with practiced efficiency. Emily struggled to keep up, her lungs burning from the lack of fresh air. She wished she could take a moment to catch her breath, to process everything that had happened. But there was no time. They had to keep moving, keep pressing forward. Finally, they emerged into a hidden chamber lit by flickering candles and the soft glow of computer screens. Emily's jaw dropped as she took in the sight. The room was filled with rows upon rows of computers, each one humming with activity. "Welcome to our command center," the group's leader said, stepping forward. He was an older man, his face weathered by hardship and time, but his eyes still burned with the fire of rebellion. "This is where we coordinate our efforts, where we plan our attacks, and where we keep the government off our backs." Emily felt a sense of awe wash over her as she took in the scope of their operation. It was so much bigger than she'd ever imagined. "Thank you for rescuing me," she repeated, her voice small in the face of such bravery. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The leader smiled, his eyes crinkling with kindness. "You're one of us now, Emily, and we're going to make sure that you get the chance to tell your story, to show the world what's really going on." He paused, his expression growing serious. "But first, we need to prepare. The government won't give up without a fight." As the rebels began to bustle around her, preparing for the next phase of their mission, Emily felt a sense of purpose and belonging wash over her. She knew that her life would never be the same again, that she could never go back to the way things were. But she also knew that she was part of something bigger now, something truly important. As the hours ticked by, she sat down at one of the computer terminals, determined to do her part for the cause. She logged onto the government's network, careful not to leave a trace of their presence behind, and began to gather more intelligence. She pored over classified documents, hacked into restricted databases, and uncovered countless secrets that the government had hoped to keep hidden. As the sun began to rise, casting its pale light through the grimy windows of the bunker, Emily felt a sense of accomplishment and pride that she'd never known before. She'd come a long way from her days as a quiet, dutiful scientist in the Biodome. Now she was a rebel, a fighter for freedom and a brighter future. As the world around them changes at an unprecedented pace, Emily and the Free Horizon find themselves at the epicenter of a global revolution. The terraforming technology they've worked so tirelessly to release has ignited a firestorm of protests, uprisings, and calls for freedom across the globe. Governments that once seemed all-powerful now appear fragile and out of touch, their iron grip on society threatened by an unstoppable force of popular dissent. Emily, now a symbol of hope and resistance, finds herself in high demand. She's interviewed by international news outlets, meets with world leaders, and even receives death threats from those who fear the power she holds. The weight of these responsibilities is immense, and she often finds herself questioning her own abilities to make a difference. Throughout it all, Emily remains steadfast in her belief that the future of humanity lies in freedom and self-determination. She continues to work closely with the Free Horizon, helping them navigate the treacherous political landscape and ensuring that their message of hope remains clear and uncompromised. One of their first priorities is to establish secure communication channels with other resistance groups around the world. They must coordinate their efforts, share resources, and plan their next moves strategically. Emily's scientific background proves invaluable here, as she helps the Free Horizon develop encrypted messaging systems and secure data networks that are virtually impenetrable to government surveillance. As the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, Emily begins to see signs of progress. Governments that once seemed implacable are starting to crumble under the weight of their own corruption and incompetence. In some areas, the resistance has even managed to take power, establishing new, more democratic governments in their place. But the fight is far from over. The old regime still has loyalists and mercenaries at its disposal, and they will stop at nothing to regain control. Emily finds herself caught between the promise of a brighter future and the very real threat of violence and oppression. She must tread carefully, always considering the consequences of her actions and the potential impact they might have on those she loves. One of the most difficult decisions Emily faces comes when she's approached by a representative of the new government in her home country. They offer her a position of power, promising that she can continue her work for the greater good while also ensuring that the most vulnerable members of society are protected. It's a tempting offer, but Emily knows that accepting it would mean compromising her principles and aligning herself with an organization that has, in the past, shown itself to be just as oppressive as the old regime. In the end, Emily chooses to remain true to her beliefs. She declines the offer, instead focusing her energy on building coalitions and alliances between different resistance groups. Her leadership is instrumental in forging a new global order, one that values freedom, equality, and self-determination above all else. As the dust begins to settle, Emily finds herself looking toward the future with a mix of hope and trepidation. The world has changed irrevocably, and the path forward is fraught with uncertainty. But she takes comfort in the knowledge that she has done her best to guide humanity toward a brighter tomorrow, and that her efforts have not been in vain. The road ahead may be long and difficult, but with the support of her friends and allies, Emily is prepared to face whatever challenges lie ahead.